8:15 in the morning. The East China Sea. An American Global Hawk surveillance drone banked slowly through the thin air at 60,000 feet. It was not alone. A Chinese J-20 stealth fighter had already achieved a full fire control radar lock on the unmanned aircraft. The drone had no pilot to feel the surge of adrenaline. It had no defensive systems to return fire. It was a $200 million machine drifting toward a catastrophic conclusion. The morning sun reflected off the white composite skin of the drone. Below the aircraft, the ocean was a hazy expanse of gray and blue. The Global Hawk moved on a pre-programmed track, its massive wings stretching wider than a Boeing 737. It was a silent eye in the sky. It was designed to watch, not to fight. The question that would soon haunt the White House was simple. Is a machine worth a war? 7,000 miles away, in a darkened control room in Grand Forks, North Dakota, a sensor operator stared at his display. His breath hitched. A crimson icon flashed over the position of the drone. The radar warning receiver was screaming a digital warning through his headset. This was not a routine intercept. This was a kill chain in its final stages. The operator spoke to his supervisor. "Sir, we have a hard lock. It is a J-20. Bearing 090. The mission supervisor leaned over the console. His face was pale in the blue light of the monitors. "Confirm. Is he painting us, or just tracking?" "It is a continuous wave, sir. He is ready to fire. I am seeing high pulse repetition frequency. He has a solution. Link the feed to Pacific Command." Now, the digital data surged through satellite relays. It bounced from the drone to a satellite, then down to a ground station, and finally into the secure halls of the Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii. Within seconds, the image of the Chinese fighter appeared on a wall-sized screen. The J-20 was a jagged, predatory shape. It held a position just 3 miles from the Global Hawk. It was close enough for the drone's high-resolution cameras to see the individual rivets on the fighter's skin. Inside the cockpit of the J-20, the world was a high-definition digital map. The Chinese pilot adjusted his oxygen mask. His display showed the lumbering American drone as a high-contrast target. His mission was clear. Assert sovereignty. Demonstrate that the American presence in this sector was no longer tolerated. The pilot felt the weight of the moment. He was not just flying a jet. He was a piece on a global chessboard. He waited for the final confirmation from his regional command on Hainan Island. The American drone was a ghost. It possessed no flares. It had no chaff. It had no electronic countermeasures. It was a strategic asset that was perfectly vulnerable. The drone's computer continued to fly its mission. It did not know it was seconds from being turned into a cloud of titanium and carbon fiber. The tension moved from the control consoles to the highest levels of government. In Washington, the reports were already reaching the National Security Council. The situation was unprecedented. Usually, a manned aircraft could signal intent. A pilot could wave off or maneuver. But the Global Hawk was an empty chair. It could only sit and wait to be destroyed. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 8:25 in the morning. The East China Sea. Inside the cockpit of the J-20, Captain Chen adjusted the brightness of his helmet-mounted display. The American drone appeared as a green wireframe icon in his center of vision. It was a massive, slow-moving target. To Chen, the Global Hawk looked like a prehistoric bird, clumsy and unaware of the predator behind it. He moved his throttle forward. The twin engines of the stealth fighter pushed him closer. He was now only 2 miles from the drone's tail. The Chinese pilot spoke into his mask. "Command, I have visual. The target is maintaining its track. Fire control is locked, awaiting further instruction." The response from the ground station on Hainan Island was crisp. "Copy. Maintain lock. Do not fire unless the target violates the restricted zone. We are monitoring the American reaction." Chen watched the drone through his infrared sensor. He could see the heat from its single engine. It was a clean signature. He knew that a single PL-10 missile would end the mission in seconds. There was no pilot to fight back. No human life would be lost. In his mind, this made the target a political statement rather than a military threat. He felt a strange sense of detachment. He was a scalpel waiting for the hand of his government to move. 8:28 in the morning. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Lieutenant Miller gripped the armrests of his chair in the control station. On his screen, the optical camera of the Global Hawk was zoomed in on the J-20. The image was terrifyingly clear. He could see the dark, ram-coated surface of the Chinese fighter. He could see the weapon bay doors on the belly of the jet. They remained closed for now, but the radar lock warning was still pulsing at the bottom of his screen. Miller spoke to his co-pilot. He is closing the gap. 3,000 meters. 2,000. He is playing with us. The co-pilot looked at the telemetry. The drone is staying on the pre-programmed flight path. If we deviate, it might look like a provocation. If we stay, he might just take the shot. We are sitting ducks, Miller said. We have zero defensive options, no flares, no maneuvering capability that can outrun a fifth-generation fighter. We are just watching our own funeral. The room was silent, except for the hum of cooling fans and the quiet clicks of keyboards. The sensor operator felt a deep sense of frustration. He was trained to fly, but today, he was merely a spectator. He was a witness to a potential act of war. The feed from the drone was being broadcast to the Pentagon in real time. Every movement of the J-20 was being analyzed by hundreds of people. Yet, Miller was the only one with his hands on the controls. 8:31 in the morning. The East China Sea. The J-20 suddenly accelerated. It pulled alongside the Global Hawk, less than 50 feet from its long, slender wing. The wake turbulence from the fighter rocked the drone. The flight computers in the Global Hawk fought to stabilize the aircraft. The horizon on Miller's screen tilted violently. Inside the J-20, Chen turned his head to the left. He looked directly at the camera ball of the drone. He knew someone was watching him from the other side of the world. He raised a gloved hand and made a slow, deliberate gesture. He pointed toward the horizon. Then he pointed down at the water. It was a clear signal. Leave or be destroyed. The Chinese pilot's voice came over. The encrypted channel again. The American is struggling with the wake. They are not turning, requesting permission to cross their nose. Permission granted, the commander replied. Show them the edge of the envelope. Chen pulled back on the stick. The J-20 roared, its nose pitching up as it began a high G climb directly in front of the drone's flight path. The turbulence was about to get much worse. 8:35 in the morning. The White House Situation Room. The air in the windowless room was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and ozone from the electronic displays. A group of analysts in suits and officers in dress uniforms watched the live feed from the East China Sea. On the central screen, the Chinese J-20 was a dark, blurred shape in the high-altitude haze. It was dancing around the Global Hawk with lethal grace. The National Security Advisor turned to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. What are our options? Can we get an escort to that drone? The general shook his head slowly. Negative. Our nearest fighters are out of Kadena Air Base. That is over 400 miles away. By the time an F-35 gets on station, the situation will be over. We would have to refuel them twice just to stay in the area for 10 minutes. So we are watching a $200 million asset get bullied by a manned fighter, the advisor said. If they shoot it down, what is our response? The room went quiet. This was the core of the crisis. A drone was a machine. It carried no pilot. There would be no grieving families. There would be no coffins draped in flags. But it was a sovereign American aircraft in international airspace. If the United States allowed it to be destroyed without a response, the message to Beijing would be clear. The East China Sea was no longer open. If we retaliate, the general warned, we are looking at a kinetic exchange. We have a carrier strike group 300 miles to the south. We could launch, but that is an escalation. We are talking about a potential war over an empty cockpit. 8:40 in the morning. The East China Sea. The Global Hawk was struggling. Its flight control software was working overtime to counter the heavy wake turbulence from the J-20. Every time the Chinese pilot crossed the nose of the drone, the air became a chaotic mess of vortices. The drone dipped and surged. Its long, slender wings flexed dangerously. Inside the J-20, Captain Chen felt the vibration of his own engines. He was testing the limits of the American software. He wanted to see how much the drone could take before its computers gave up. Chen keyed his radio. Command. The target is unstable. I am preparing for a second high-speed pass. I will cross within 50 meters. The controller on Hainan Island responded. Proceed, but do not make contact. We want them to leave. We do not want a collision. Not yet. 8:42 in the morning. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Lieutenant Miller watched his flight data screen. A yellow warning light began to pulse. Structural load limit. We are hitting the yellow zone on the main spar. If he hits us with another wake, the wing might snap. His supervisor grabbed the back of Miller's chair. Can we climb? Get above him. We are at 60,000 feet, sir. Miller said. This is our ceiling. We have nowhere to go but down. And if we go down, we are right in the middle of their surface-to-air missile envelope. The supervisor looked at the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. The drone was trapped in a box made of physics and politics. There was no exit. Keep it steady, the supervisor said. The world is watching this feed. If he takes the shot, let the whole world see it. The drone continued its straight line. It was a target that refused to blink. 8:45 in the morning. Hainan Island Command Center. The underground bunker was a hive of activity. Large tactical maps glowed with the positions of every American ship and aircraft in the region. The sector commander stood behind a row of technicians. He watched the telemetry from Captain Chen's fighter. The American drone was approaching a sensitive maritime boundary. It was a line in the water that Beijing considered a red line. The commander leaned into his microphone. Eagle 1, this is command. You are authorized for a conditional engagement. If the target crosses the 123-degree east longitude line, you are free to fire. The decision is yours. Defend the airspace. Inside the J-20, Captain Chen felt a chill go down his spine. The words free to fire changed everything. This was no longer a game of chicken. It was a combat mission. He reached for the master arm switch on his control panel. He flipped the guard and toggled the switch to the armed position. On his head-up display, the green radar boxes turned a steady, lethal red. Copy, command, Chen said. His voice was flat. Weapon systems are hot. I am in position for a high-6 attack. Target is 3 minutes from the line. 8:48 in the morning. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Lieutenant Miller saw the change on his screen instantly. The radar warning receiver emitted a continuous, high-pitched tone. It was the sound of a missile guidance system, locking onto the drone's specific electronic signature. The J-20 was no longer just watching. It was ranging the target for a terminal strike. Sir, he is in fire control mode, Miller shouted. He has a firing solution. He is behind us and above. We are in the heart of his envelope. The mission supervisor gripped the edge of the console until his knuckles turned white. Execute the Delta IV maneuver. Now, show him we are aware of the lock. Try to break his track. Miller hit a sequence of keys on his board. 7,000 miles away, the Global Hawk responded. The massive drone began a slow, agonizingly deliberate bank to the left. It was a pre-programmed defensive pattern designed to signal to an interceptor that the drone was reacting to the threat. It was not a combat maneuver. The drone was too heavy and too slow for dogfighting. It was a robotic plea for space. The drone's long wings dipped. The flight computer struggled to maintain lift in the thin air at 62,000 feet. As it turned, the high-resolution camera stayed locked on the J-20. The Chinese fighter did not move. It stayed perfectly mirrored in the drone's wake. It was like a shadow that refused to be shaken. 8:51 in the morning. The East China Sea. Captain Chen watched the American drone bank. He saw the slow, mechanical movement. It reminded him of a wounded animal trying to hide. It was pathetic. He knew the drone had no chance of breaking his lock. His radar was too advanced. His missiles were too fast. Command: "The target is maneuvering," Chen reported. "It is a predictable pattern. It is not an escape. They are testing my resolve. I am maintaining the lock. I am 2 minutes from the line." "Stay on him, Eagle 1, the controller replied. "The Americans are watching the same data. They know where the line is. If they cross it, they have chosen their fate." Inside the cockpit, Chen's thumb rested on the red button on his flight stick. He could feel the vibration of the jet. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. The distance between the drone and the invisible line in the ocean was closing. 10 miles. 9 miles. Each mile brought 2 nuclear powers closer to a point of no return. The sky was a perfect, heartless blue. There were no clouds to hide in. There was only the predator, the prey, and a line in the water that was about to become the most important coordinate on Earth. 8:55 in the morning. The East China Sea. The Chinese J-20 was now less than 1,000 meters from the American drone. At this distance, the stealth fighter was no longer a ghost on a screen. It was a physical, lethal presence. Captain Chen could see the individual sensor windows on the belly of the Global Hawk. He could see the slight vibration of the drone's massive 70-foot wings as they sliced through the thin atmosphere. Chen adjusted his position. He moved his fighter directly behind the drone's engine exhaust. He wanted the American operators to see his heat signature. He wanted them to know that his infrared missiles had a perfect track. On his helmet display, the targeting reticle was a solid, unwavering circle. The tone in his headset was a constant, aggressive growl. "Command, I am in the terminal phase of the intercept," Chen reported. "The target is 5 miles from the line. I have a 95% probability of kill with a single rail-launched missile." The response from Hainan Island was devoid of emotion. "Copy. Eagle 1. You are the final arbiter of this airspace. If the drone crosses the mark, you are cleared for a kinetic solution. We are prepared for the consequences." Inside the cockpit, Chen felt the cold logic of the mission. He was not just a pilot. He was a weapon of the state. He checked his fuel state. He had enough for 10 more minutes of high-G maneuvering. It was more than enough time to finish the job. 8:58 in the morning. Indo-Pacific Command, Hawaii. Admiral Harrison stood in the center of the command floor. He was surrounded by officers and intelligence analysts. On the main screen, the telemetry from the Global Hawk showed a terrifying reality. The Chinese fighter was essentially glued to the drone's tail. "Sir, the drone's navigation system is drifting," an analyst reported. "It is trending toward the restricted zone. It is a software lag. The flight computer is struggling to maintain the track because of the earlier wake turbulence." The admiral looked at the clock. "How long until it crosses the line?" 90 seconds, sir." "Can we override the flight path from Grand Forks?" Harrison asked. "Negative, sir. The satellite link is experiencing heavy interference. We think the J-20 is using a localized jammer. The drone is on autopilot. It is flying a straight line into a disaster." The admiral picked up a secure phone. "Get me the White House. Now. We need to decide if we are going to let them take it. If we don't signal a turn, that drone is dead in 2 minutes." The room was filled with the frantic clicking of keys. Everyone knew the stakes. This was a test of resolve. If the Americans ordered the drone to turn now, it would look like a retreat under fire. If they let it fly straight, they were betting that Beijing was bluffing. It was a high-stakes game played with a machine that could not understand the rules. 9 o'clock in the morning. The East China Sea. The sun was high now. It turned the surface of the ocean into a sheet of brilliant white fire. The Global Hawk crossed the invisible boundary of the 123-degree line. It did not slow down. It did not turn. It moved forward with the stubbornness of a machine. Inside the J-20, a red warning light flashed on Chen's console. The target had violated the restricted zone. The conditions for engagement had been met. Chen's hand tightened on the flight stick. His thumb moved to the weapon release button. The safety was off. The missile was slave to his line of sight. He only had to press the button. "Target has crossed," Chen said. His voice was a whisper. I am engaging. The world seemed to slow down. The hum of the engines and the scream of the radar lock reached a crescendo. The next 3 seconds would decide the history of the coming decade. 9 o'clock and 30 seconds in the morning. The East China Sea. Inside the cockpit of the J-20, the world had narrowed down to a single red circle. Captain Chen felt the vibration of the weapon bay doors beginning to cycle. It was a mechanical shutter that traveled through the airframe and into his spine. On his glass display, the words "shoot" flashed in a steady, rhythmic pulse. The infrared seeker on his PL-10 missile was staring directly into the heat of the American drone's engine. The lock was absolute. Chen's thumb was heavy on the trigger. He had practiced this 1,000 times in the simulator, but the simulator never had this weight. He was the tip of the spear. He was the moment where policy became kinetic. Eagle 1. I am in the final 3 seconds of the launch sequence, Chen said. His voice was forced. 3, 2, 1. 9:01 in the morning. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Lieutenant Miller's headset exploded with a new sound. It was the high-frequency warble of a missile approach warning. The Global Hawk's passive sensors had detected the opening of the J-20's weapon bays. The change in the fighter's radar cross-section was unmistakable. The drone's computer realized it was no longer being followed. It was being targeted. "Sir, weapon bay doors are open," Miller shouted. "We have a launch sequence detection. He is taking the shot." In the control room, the mission supervisor didn't blink. He looked at the live feed. The camera was vibrating. The drone was being buffeted by the supersonic air flowing off the Chinese fighter. "Stay on track," the supervisor ordered. "Do not deviate. If he fires, we want the telemetry to be perfect. We want the world to see the missile leave the rail." 9:01 and 30 seconds in the morning. The White House Situation Room. The President of the United States stood at the head of the table. He leaned forward, his hands pressing into the polished wood. On the screen, a tactical map showed the two icons merged into one. To his left, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs held a secure handset. The line was open to the carrier strike group in the Philippine Sea. "Mr. President," the general said, "if the drone is lost, our response plan is ready. We have 2 destroyers within range to conduct a targeted electronic strike on their coastal radar. It is a proportional signal of strength." The president did not look away from the screen. "Wait. If he hasn't fired yet, we wait. Every second is a chance for someone to think twice. He is inside the launch window, sir," the general warned. "He could fire at any moment." 9:02 in the morning. The East China Sea. Captain Chen felt the resistance of the trigger. He was at the second stage of the press. In another millisecond, the electrical impulse would jump from the jet to the missile. The motor would ignite. The American drone would be a ball of fire over the Pacific. Chen's eyes flicked to his secondary sensor screen. Something was wrong. A new icon had appeared on his long-range radar. It was large. It was slow. And it was moving directly into the path of his missile's projected flight corridor. The pilot's heart hammered against his ribs. He checked the identification tag. It was a civilian transponder, a Boeing 777, a commercial airliner from Singapore to Tokyo. It was at 35,000 feet, but it was crossing the exact line of fire. If his missile missed the drone, or if the drone exploded into 1,000 pieces of debris, the airliner was in the path of the wreckage. Chen froze. His finger remained on the trigger, but he did not pull. The logic of the kill chain had been interrupted by the reality of the world. "Command, I have a civilian contact," Chen radioed. "They are in the debris field zone. Requesting clarification. Do I proceed?" The silence from Hainan Island was deafening. It lasted 5 seconds, then 10. The drone continued to fly. The J-20 continued to shadow. The missile stayed on the rail. 9:03 in the morning. The East China Sea. The command center on Hainan Island remained silent for 12 seconds. It was a lifetime in a dogfight. The presence of the civilian Boeing 777 had changed the math. A missile launch now carried the risk of an international disaster that Beijing could not contain. If the missile missed the drone, or If its active radar seeker locked onto the much larger heat signature of the airliner, the consequences would be global. Inside the J-20, Captain Chen saw the airliner on his infrared sensor. It was a massive, glowing heat source on his display. It was only 20 miles away and closing at 500 knots. His finger stayed off the trigger, but his weapon bay doors remained open. He was waiting for the final word. Eagle 1. The controller finally spoke. Hold your fire. I repeat, hold your fire. Do not close the weapon bay doors yet. Maintain position and shadow. Chen felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. In Grand Forks, North Dakota, Lieutenant Miller saw the civilian traffic icon flashing on his secondary screen. The Global Hawk was a machine governed by logic and safety protocols. Its onboard traffic collision avoidance system had just detected two threats. One was the cooperative civilian airliner. The other was the non-cooperative Chinese fighter. The drone's autonomous flight computer took control. It did not wait for Miller to move his joystick. It did not wait for permission from the Pentagon. It identified an imminent mid-air collision risk with the J-20. "Sir, the drone is taking the stick," Miller shouted. Autonomous avoidance is active. 7,000 miles away, the Global Hawk suddenly banked hard to the right and pushed its nose down into a steep, high-speed dive. It was an emergency maneuver designed to put vertical distance between the aircraft and the fighter. "He is diving," Chen yelled. The Global Hawk's massive, 60-foot wing swept past the J-20's cockpit canopy. It was a matter of feet. The wake turbulence from the drone's sudden movement slammed into the Chinese fighter. Chen's jet rolled violently to the left. His helmet hit the side of the glass. For a split second, he lost his orientation, as the sky and the sea swapped places in his vision. In the White House Situation Room, the live video feed from the drone spun wildly. The horizon disappeared. The screen was filled with a dark, blurred shape of the Chinese fighter's tail section as it whipped past the camera lens. "Collision," someone screamed in the room. "No," the general said, his eyes fixed on the telemetry. "Near miss. They almost touched." The Global Hawk continued its dive, plummeting through 50,000 feet. It was moving toward the clouds. It was moving toward the civilian airliner's altitude. The J-20 was still recovering from the tumble. Its open weapon bay doors were acting like massive air brakes, making the jet sluggish and difficult to handle in the thin air. 9:04 in the morning. The radar lock was broken. The sudden change in geometry had forced the J-20's fire control computer to drop the track. Chen struggled to regain level flight. He was fighting the fly-by-wire system as it tried to compensate for the turbulence. "Command, I have lost the target," Chen radioed. His voice was ragged. The drone performed an erratic maneuver. "I am in a recovery. The airliner is directly below us at 35,000 feet. The situation had spiraled out of everyone's control. The machine had reacted to the man, and the man had reacted to the machine. Now, both were falling through a sky filled with 300 innocent passengers who had no idea they were in the middle of a war zone. The morning was no longer quiet. It was a storm of metal and software. 9:03 in the morning. The East China Sea. The command center on Hainan Island remained silent for 12 seconds. It was a lifetime in a dogfight. The presence of the civilian Boeing 777 had changed the math. A missile launch now carried the risk of an international disaster that Beijing could not contain. If the missile missed the drone, or if its active radar seeker locked onto the much larger heat signature of the airliner, the consequences would be global. Inside the J-20, Captain Chen saw the airliner on his infrared sensor. It was a massive, glowing heat source on his display. It was only 20 miles away and closing at 500 knots. His finger stayed off the trigger, but his weapon bay doors remained open. He was waiting for the final word. Eagle 1. The controller finally spoke. "Hold your fire. I repeat, hold your fire. Do not close the weapon bay doors yet. Maintain position and shadow." Chen felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. In Grand Forks, North Dakota, Lieutenant Miller saw the civilian traffic icon flashing on his secondary screen. The Global Hawk was a machine governed by logic and safety protocols. Its onboard traffic collision avoidance system had just detected two threats. One was the cooperative civilian airliner. The other was the non-cooperative Chinese fighter. The drone's autonomous flight computer took control. It did not wait for Miller to move his joystick. It did not wait for permission from the Pentagon. It identified an imminent mid-air collision risk with the J-20. "Sir, the drone is taking the stick," Miller shouted. Autonomous avoidance is active. 7,000 miles away, the Global Hawk suddenly banked hard to the right and pushed its nose down into a steep, high-speed dive. It was an emergency maneuver designed to put vertical distance between the aircraft and the fighter. "He is diving," Chen yelled. The Global Hawk's massive 60-foot wing swept past the J-20's cockpit canopy. It was a matter of feet. The wake turbulence from the drone's sudden movement slammed into the Chinese fighter. Chen's jet rolled violently to the left. His helmet hit the side of the glass. For a split second, he lost his orientation as the sky and the sea swapped places in his vision. In the White House Situation Room, the live video feed from the drone spun wildly. The horizon disappeared. The screen was filled with a dark, blurred shape of the Chinese fighter's tail section as it whipped past the camera lens. "Collision!" Someone screamed in the room. "No," the general said, his eyes fixed on the telemetry. "Near miss." They almost touched. The Global Hawk continued its dive, plummeting through 50,000 feet. It was moving toward the clouds. It was moving toward the civilian airliner's altitude. The J-20 was still recovering from the tumble. Its open weapon bay doors were acting like massive air brakes, making the jet sluggish and difficult to handle in the thin air. 9:04 in the morning. The radar lock was broken. The sudden change in geometry had forced the J-20's fire control computer to drop the track. Chen struggled to regain level flight. He was fighting the fly-by-wire system as it tried to compensate for the turbulence. "Command, I have lost the target," Chen radioed. His voice was ragged. The drone performed an erratic maneuver. "I am in a recovery. The airliner is directly below us at 35,000 feet. The situation had spiraled out of everyone's control. The machine had reacted to the man, and the man had reacted to the machine. Now, both were falling through a sky filled with 300 innocent passengers who had no idea they were in the middle of a war zone. The morning was no longer quiet. It was a storm of metal and software. 9:05 in the morning. The East China Sea. The Boeing 777 crossed beneath the Global Hawk with 3,000 feet of vertical separation. To the passengers in the cabin, the American drone was a tiny, white speck against the deep blue of the upper atmosphere. They had no idea that a fifth-generation stealth fighter was tumbling less than a mile above them. The disaster had been avoided by the narrowest of margins. Inside the J-20, Captain Chen fought the controls. His aircraft had dropped 4,000 feet in a matter of seconds. The open weapon bay doors had created massive drag and turbulence. He slammed the switch to close the doors. He felt the aerodynamic snap as the belly of the jet became smooth once again. The fighter stabilized. The red chute prompts vanished from his display. "Command, I have regained control," Chen radioed. "The target is leveling off at 40,000 feet. I am closing the distance. Requesting instructions. The missile lock is broken." The response from Hainan Island was no longer immediate. There was a new layer of hesitation in the voice of the controller. "Stay back, Eagle 1. Maintain 5 miles. Do not re-engage the fire control radar. We are receiving a high-level communication from the Americans." 9:10 in the morning. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense stood in the National Military Command Center. He held a secure handset to his ear. On the other end of the line was a senior official from the Chinese Ministry of National Defense in Beijing. The hotline was active. For the first time in an hour, the two nuclear powers were talking instead of staring at screens. "We are tracking the maneuver," the secretary said. "Our aircraft performed an autonomous safety climb. It was not an attack. We are ordering the drone to return to international airspace immediately. If your pilot maintains his distance, this incident ends now." The Chinese official spoke through a translator. "Your aircraft violated a restricted zone. Our pilot acted within his rights to defend our sovereignty. However, we recognize the risk to civilian aviation. We will allow your drone to exit. If it deviates again, we will take the necessary measures." The secretary hung up the phone and looked at the admiral. "Tell Grand Forks to bring that bird home. Now. No more surveillance loops. No more testing the line. Get it out of there before someone else's computer decides to start a war." 9:15 in the morning. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Lieutenant Miller felt the sweat cooling on his neck. The manual control override was back in his hands. The autonomous safety protocols had disengaged once the collision risk passed. I saw the J-20 on his long-range sensor. The fighter had pulled back. It was now a steady icon 5 miles behind the drone. The aggressive, high-frequency radar warning had stopped. "I have the stick," Miller said. His voice was shaky. "Coming left to heading 180. We are exiting the sector." The mission supervisor stood behind him. He placed a hand on Miller's shoulder. "Easy does it. Just a smooth, standard turn. Keep your eyes on that fighter. If he moves an inch closer, I want to know." The Global Hawk banked. It was a slow, heavy turn that felt like it took an eternity. The drone was no longer an invisible spy. It was a very loud, very obvious target that was being escorted out of the room by a bully. On the screen, Miller watched the J-20. It followed every move the drone made. It stayed exactly 5 miles away. It was a professional, cold shadow. The immediate threat of a missile launch was gone, but the tension remained. The two pilots, separated by half the world and a digital link, were now tied together by a shared moment of near death. The East China Sea was wide and empty. The drone moved toward the south. The fighter followed. The sky was still blue. But for the men in the control rooms, the world looked very different than it had an hour ago. 9:20 in the morning. The edge of the contested zone. The American Global Hawk crossed the invisible line back into undisputed international airspace. It was still at 40,000 feet. Its long wings were level. Its sensors were still active, but they were no longer pointed at the Chinese coast. They were focused on the deep water of the Philippine Sea. The drone was retreating, but it was doing so with mechanical dignity. Inside the J-20, Captain Chen watched the distance between his fighter and the drone increase. The digital box on his display stayed green. The radar was in a search and track mode, not a fire control lock. He had been ordered to remain 5 miles back. He was a silent escort. He was making sure the intruder did not turn back. The controller on Hainan Island spoke. "Eagle 1. The target has exited the restricted sector. You are cleared to return to base. Perform a standard brake and climb to 50,000 feet." Chen looked at the white shape of the drone one last time. It looked small against the vastness of the ocean. He felt a strange sense of connection to the machine. For 40 minutes, their lives had been intertwined. He had almost destroyed it. It had almost destroyed him with its wake. And 300 civilians had almost been caught in the middle. "Copy, command," Chen said. "Braking right. Returning to Hainan." Chen pulled his stick to the right and rolled the fighter. He pushed the throttles into afterburner. 2 massive plumes of blue and orange flame erupted from his engines. The J-20 surged forward, climbing away from the drone at twice the speed of sound. Within seconds, the stealth fighter was a tiny speck in the distance. Then, it was gone. 9:30 in the morning. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Lieutenant Miller saw the icon for the J-20 accelerate and bank away on his screen. The radar warning receiver was finally silent. The room, which had been filled with the noise of alarms and frantic shouting, was now unnervingly quiet. The mission supervisor stood behind Miller, his hand still on the operator's shoulder. "He is gone, sir," Miller said. "Contact lost at 70 miles. He is heading back to the mainland." The supervisor exhaled a long, shaky breath. "Confirm our status. Are we still in the green on all systems?" "The airframe is stable," Miller replied, checking his telemetry. "The stress on the wing spar was high, but we are within safety limits. Fuel is sufficient for the return to Guam." We are on the home stretch. The supervisor turned to the rest of the room. Listen up. Nobody leaves their station. I want a full data dump of the entire engagement. Every radar spike, every camera frame, every line of autonomous code. The Pentagon is going to want to know exactly why that drone dove when it did. We need to know if the software saved us, or if it nearly killed us. 9:45 in the morning. The East China Sea. The Global Hawk was alone again. It flew through a sky that was empty of fighters and airliners. To a casual observer, nothing had changed. The sun was still bright. The water was still calm. But the data recorded in the drone's memory banks was worth more than the aircraft itself. It contained the electronic signature of a fifth-generation fighter in a combat-ready state. It contained the response times of the Chinese command structure. In Hawaii and Washington, the analysis was already beginning. The crisis was over, but the lessons were just starting to be learned. The high-stakes game of shadows had reached a temporary stalemate. The two sides had come to the very edge of a shooting war and had looked into the abyss. At the last second, both had chosen to step back. The drone continued its long flight back to the island of Guam. It was a machine that had no feelings, but the men who flew it were exhausted. They had fought a war without firing a single shot. The morning was finally quiet. The sky belonged to the birds and the satellites once more. 2:45 in the afternoon. Andersen Air Force Base, Guam. The Global Hawk appeared as a thin, white sliver against the tropical clouds. It descended toward the runway with mechanical precision. There was no victory roll. There was no crowd of cheering airmen. As the heavy landing gear touched the tarmac, a small team of technicians waited in silence. The drone slowed to a halt, and its engine whined down into a whisper. It was just a machine returning from a long day of work. But inside its hard drives was the digital record of a near disaster. Ground crews moved in to tow the aircraft into a high-security hangar. They worked with the quiet efficiency of men who knew they had narrowly avoided a catastrophe. The sensor ball, which had captured the terrifyingly close images of the Chinese J-20, was now dark. The drone was powered down. Its mission was over. 48 hours later. The Pentagon, Washington. The final report was labeled Top Secret. It sat on a mahogany table in a secure briefing room. The National Security Advisor and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs sat across from each other. They were looking at a series of high-resolution still images taken from the drone's cameras. The most chilling photo showed Captain Chen's face through his cockpit canopy, less than 50 feet away. You could see the sun reflecting off his helmet. You could see the tension in his gloved hand. The general tapped the photo. Our analysis of the flight code is complete. The autonomous dive was triggered by a specific set of parameters in the collision avoidance software. If the drone hadn't moved, the J-20 would likely have made contact with the wing. The software didn't just save the drone. It prevented a mid-air collision that would have left no survivors in either aircraft. And the Chinese? The advisor asked. What is their takeaway? They are calling it a victory for their sovereignty, the general replied. They proved they could achieve a hard lock on our most advanced unmanned systems. But our intelligence suggests their internal debrief was just as sober as ours. They realized how close they came to hitting that Singaporean airliner. Neither side wanted that blood on their hands. It was a tactical win for them, but a strategic warning for everyone. The conversation turned to the drone trap. The analysts had concluded that the entire engagement was a carefully choreographed test. Beijing wanted to see if the United States would risk a manned escalation to protect an unmanned asset. They had pushed the envelope to the very edge of the table. The response, from Washington holding fire and opening the hotline, had shown a level of restraint that surprised both capitals. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Beijing. In a quiet office overlooking the city, the sector commander reviewed the telemetry from Captain Chen's fighter. He looked at the moment the weapon bay doors had opened. He looked at the moment they had closed. He made a small note in the margin of the document. He did not praise the pilot for his aggression, nor did he criticize him for his hesitation. He simply noted that the mission objectives were met without the loss of hardware or the escalation to open conflict. The report was filed away. It joined thousands of others in a vast archive of close calls and silent confrontations. In the era of modern warfare, the most important battles were the ones that didn't happen. The victory was found. In the silence of the guns, the East China Sea remained a contested space. The ships still sailed, the planes still flew. But for one morning, the world had seen the face of a new kind of war. A war where machines made life-and-death decisions in milliseconds. A war where the empty chair was the most dangerous seat in the sky. No medals were issued. No speeches were made. The two nations continued their long, cold dance across the Pacific. Both sides had learned that the most advanced weapons are useless if the people behind them lose their nerve. And both sides had learned that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is choose not to pull the trigger. The sky was empty now. The ocean was still. The incident was over.